The voicemail came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing discharge paperwork at Savannah Memorial. My sister's voice, bright and careless, like she was ordering brunch. "Hey, so the wedding party is finalized and we had to make some cuts. You're not on the list. Mom and Dad agree it's better this way. Don't make it weird, okay? Love you." Don't make it weird. I played it twice in the break room, standing next to a vending machine that hummed louder than my own breathing. Then I checked the family group chat. My father had replied to Celeste's announcement with a single thumbs-up emoji. My mother sent a heart. 47 people in that chat, and not one of them questioned why the bride's only sister had just been erased from the wedding. I sat down on a plastic chair that squeaked against the linoleum and stared at the ceiling tiles. Something inside me did not break. It rearranged, like tumblers in a lock falling into a new position, opening a door I had been standing in front of my whole life without ever reaching for the handle. I typed back one word, "Okay," set my phone on the table, went back to my patients. But behind every smile I gave that afternoon, a calculation was already running. Because here is what my family forgot. Every single vendor contract for Celeste's wedding was in my name. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the band, the photographer, $94,000 total. My signature, my credit, my liability. And by tomorrow morning, I was going to make every last dollar of it disappear. I should probably explain how a 31-year-old nurse practitioner ended up bankrolling her younger sister's six-figure wedding. The short answer is the same reason I paid for everything else in my family. Because I was the one who could, and no one ever bothered to ask if I was willing. Celeste is 4 years younger than me. From the day she was born, the rules were different. Not her fault, not at first. Our parents decided early that she was the fragile one, the creative one, the one who needed protecting. I was the sturdy one, the reliable one. The one who came out of the womb already filling out her own permission slips. When I was 14, my parents quietly moved $18,000 from the college savings my grandmother had built for me and used it to cover Celeste's enrollment at a private arts academy. Public school was crushing her spirit, they said. I found out 3 years later when I applied for financial aid and discovered the account was empty. I confronted my mother in the kitchen. She was loading the dishwasher. She didn't even turn around. "You're smart, Annika. You'll figure it out. Your sister needed it more." I did figure it out. I worked 2 jobs through nursing school and graduated with $67,000 in student loans that I am still paying off. Meanwhile, Celeste dropped out of art school after 2 semesters, moved to Atlanta, moved back, moved to Charleston, moved back again. Each move funded by emergency cash from me because Mom and Dad were always in a tight spot and Celeste would pay me back as soon as she got on her feet. She never got on her feet. She just kept falling and I kept catching her and nobody ever noticed that the catching was breaking my arms. The spreadsheet I kept was clinical in its precision. I started it at 24 after the 3rd loan that vanished without acknowledgement. Every date, every amount, every promise made and broken. By 31, the total read $112,000. Birthday gifts that were actually wire transfers. Holiday loans that stretched into infinity. Co-signing Celeste's apartment lease, then covering 6 months of rent when she ghosted the landlord. Bailing out my father's landscaping company twice when payroll couldn't be met. The spreadsheet was my sanity check. Proof that I was not imagining things. Proof that the pattern was real. 6 months before the voicemail, Celeste got engaged to a man named Troy Kessler. He was 34, worked in commercial real estate, came from a family that supposedly had money. The wedding was planned for April at Whitfield Manor, a plantation-turned-event space outside Savannah. Celeste wanted 200 guests, live music, a custom gown, the works. Nobody in my family could afford any of it. Celeste's credit was destroyed from years of missed payments. Troy said his capital was locked up in a development deal. My parents' finances were a mess. Dad's company barely breaking even. So everybody looked at me. "We'll pay you back from the wedding gifts." Troy's commission check comes in June. Dad's closing a big contract next month. Same words, different year, eternal cycle. I signed the venue contract, then the catering agreement, then the florist, the photographer, the band, the rentals. $94,000 spread across 9 vendors, my name on every line. But here's what I noticed. Troy paid for the honeymoon himself. 10 days in the Maldives, $12,000, no hesitation. Celeste's dress was $6,500, paid from her own savings account. Everyone had money for the things they wanted, only the infrastructure, the boring structural costs that nobody would Instagram, landed on me, because Annika was safe. Anika would never say no. The day after the voicemail, I started making calls. Cedar Point Catering first, then the florist, then the band. One by one, I dismantled the wedding I had built. Each call took less than 5 minutes. Each cancellation felt like a vertebra clicking back into alignment after years of being bent wrong. The penalties totaled around $31,000. Money I would lose no matter what. But the $63,000 I would no longer owe felt like oxygen after drowning. By noon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Dad, 7:04 a.m. The venue called. What did you do? Mom, 8:30 a.m. How could you do this to your sister? Celeste, 9:15 a.m. Then 9:17. Then 9:17. Then mine 23 more times. You psycho, you are dead to me. Fix this or I will destroy you. I read every message. Replied to none. Turned my phone off and went back to work. That evening, sitting in my dark apartment with a cup of chamomile tea, I noticed something I had been ignoring. An email thread that had been accidentally saved to the shared wedding planning folder on Google Drive. It was forwarded from Troy's account to Celeste's, time-stamped 3 weeks earlier. The subject line said, "Dinner reservation," but the body was a conversation between Troy and someone named Sutton. The language was not about dinner. It was about last Wednesday, about missing each other, about a hotel in Hilton Head they were planning to revisit. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall. My sister was marrying a man who was sleeping with someone else, and somewhere in the mountains of North Georgia, my grandmother's lake house was sitting empty. The house she promised me before she died. The house my father told me she left to my mother. The house I had never thought to question. Until now. Grandma Lenore was the only person in my family who ever looked at me like I was enough. She raised herself after my grandfather walked out, bought a cabin on Lake Notley in Blue Ridge with money she earned teaching piano for 30 years, paid it off slowly, lived simply, loved fiercely. She taught me to read a contract before I was 13. Your grandfather left me with nothing but heartache and a pile of IOUs, she said once, rocking on her porch while the lake shimmered below. I learned the expensive way. You won't have to. She died 3 years ago. I drove to Blue Ridge alone and held her hand on that same porch while dementia slowly stole the woman I loved. Near the end, she gripped my wrist with sudden clarity. I took care of you, Anika. It's all set up. Don't let them take it. Then the fog rolled back in, and she was gone. My father handled the estate. He said Grandma left everything to my mother. Simple. Standard. I accepted it because I was grieving and because I had spent 30 years accepting whatever my family told me was true. But now, sitting in the dark with Troy's affair emails glowing on my screen, I remembered something. Aunt Blythe at the funeral, pulling me into the kitchen, her voice barely a whisper. Your grandmother's will. Did your father ever show you what she left you? Before she could say more, Dad appeared in the doorway. Blythe, Patricia needs help with the flowers. His hand on her elbow. His smile not reaching his eyes. Blythe shot me a look that said later. But later never came. I called Blythe the next morning. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting 3 years for this call. Come to my house, she said. Don't tell your father. Blythe lived in a farmhouse outside Dahlonega, an hour from Blue Ridge. She had tea ready when I arrived, cookies on a plate, photographs of Grandma Lenore covering every surface. She handed me an envelope before I even sat down. Lenore's handwriting on the front. For Anika, if needed. The letter inside was dated 14 months before she died. Clear, deliberate, unmistakably her. My dearest girl, I am writing this because I know what our family is capable of. The lake house is yours. I filed a will with my attorney, Morris Underwood in Blue Ridge. The savings account is yours too, roughly $380,000. I want you to have a floor beneath your feet that nobody can pull out. You have always been the strong one. Not because you don't feel pain, but because you keep standing after you feel it. Don't let them take what's yours. All my love, Grandma. I read it 3 times. The tears came without warning, falling onto the paper before I could stop them. Blythe sat beside me in silence. Then she told me what she knew. Lenore updated her will while she was still sharp. Blythe witnessed it. The lake house and the savings were designated for me. Everything else went to my mother and Blythe. But the will that went through probate was different. Everything to my mother. My father as executor. No mention of me anywhere. I tried to tell you at the funeral, Blythe said. Your father showed up at my door the next week. Told me if I filled your head with confusion, there would be consequences. She paused. I should have fought harder. I'm sorry. She gave me one more piece of information. She had overheard my parents talking after the funeral. My father's voice through a closed door. It's done. She'll never find out. I drove straight to the Union County Courthouse the next morning. The clerk, a woman named Pauline, who looked like she'd seen every kind of family ugliness the mountains could produce, pulled the probate file. 2 wills existed. The one that went to probate gave everything to my mother. Generic language, boilerplate, nothing that sounded like my grandmother. But the original filing, archived and supposedly destroyed, was pure Lenore. Specific, deliberate, every word chosen with care. The lake house to me, the savings to me, and the signatures were different. The original showed Grandma's distinctive flowing script, the capital L-I recognized from decades of birthday cards. The probate version showed a shaky, hesitant hand on a document supposedly signed when Lenore was still healthy. Someone had forged it. Pauline looked at both documents over her glasses. I'm no expert, she said, but those aren't the same hand. She made me copies, quietly, off the record. My mama's will got contested by her second husband, she said. I know what it feels like. Morris Underwood, Grandma's attorney, had retired to a community on Lake Lanier. I found him that afternoon. 83 years old, sharp as a tack, furious when he heard what had happened. I sent you a letter after Lenore passed, he said. Your father returned it. Mark refused. He had copies of everything, the original will, his meeting notes, a notarized statement confirming my grandmother's wishes. She was completely lucid when she signed, Morris said. She told me her family had a talent for taking from the people who couldn't fight back. She wanted to make sure you could fight. He agreed to testify. Back in Savannah, I pulled public records on my father's company. What I found explained everything. 3 lawsuits, an IRS lien for $194,000, a state lien for $78,000. Dad's company was not just struggling, it was drowning. The lake house had been transferred to my mother 8 months after the forged will went through probate. 5 months later, sold. $720,000. Gone. Grandma Lenore's cabin, where I learned to swim, where I learned to read contracts, where I learned that someone in my family actually loved me, sold to strangers so my father could keep his company alive for another year. And the timing. The house sold 6 months ago. Troy proposed 6 months ago. The wedding started 6 months ago. I searched Troy's firm online and found my father listed as a consulting advisor. They worked together. Dad introduced Troy to Celeste. The prenuptial agreement I found in the shared wedding folder confirmed it. A clause buried in Section 4 made any inheritance received during the marriage joint property, split 50-50 in divorce. Troy wasn't marrying for love. He was marrying for access to whatever wealth my family would eventually pass down. My father had hand-delivered his own daughter to a con man. A week before the wedding was supposed to happen, my father called to invite me to a family dinner at the house. I knew it was a trap. I went anyway. When I walked into the living room, Troy was already there. So was Celeste, arms crossed, refusing to look at me. My parents flanking the room like sentries, the only empty chair faced all of them. I stayed standing. My father opened with his usual script. "This has gone far enough." I let him finish. Then I opened my bag and set 2 documents on the coffee table. "This is Grandma Lenore's real will," I said. "The one she wrote. The one you forged." I watched the color leave my father's face, "and this is the will you filed. Notice how the signatures don't match. Morris Underwood is ready to testify in court. Aunt Blythe witnessed the original." My mother picked up the papers. Her hands shook. She read aloud the provision leaving the lake house and savings to me. Then she looked at my father with an expression I had never seen before, not sadness, recognition. "You told me Mama left everything to me," she whispered. "You said it was simple." He couldn't answer. Silence is its own confession. I turned to Troy. "While we're sharing truths, your emails to Sutton are interesting reading. The hotel in Hilton Head. The plans to meet again. The message where you told her the wedding was just business and you'd have access to everything within 2 years." Celeste's face went white. Troy started stammering. I could have pulled out every piece of evidence I had. Instead, I set down the folder and stepped back. "I'm filing a lawsuit to recover my inheritance. I have the attorney, the witnesses, and the evidence. What you do with the rest of this information is your choice. But I'm done being the person this family uses and throws away." I walked out, got in my car, drove 3 blocks before the shaking started. Not fear. Release. The aftermath unfolded the way collapsing buildings do. 1 floor at a time. Troy left Celeste within 48 hours. Didn't even have the decency to do it in person, just cleared his things from the apartment while she was at her friend's house. My father's business partners started pulling out after the confrontation leaked through family gossip. When the local business journal ran a small piece about the probate dispute, the remaining investors vanished. Dad's company filed for bankruptcy 2 months later. My mother filed for divorce. She left a voicemail I haven't returned yet. I didn't know about the will. But I knew other things. I knew you were being used. I said nothing because it was easier. "I'm sorry, Annika." The lawsuit resolved faster than I expected. Morris Underwood's testimony was devastating. The forensic handwriting analysis confirmed the forgery. The judge reinstated the original will. The lake house was gone, but the sale proceeds had been frozen pending the case. Combined with the savings account, the total came to $1.1 million. The number felt unreal. After a lifetime of being the family's open wallet, I suddenly had more money than I had ever imagined, and the first thing I felt was not triumph. It was grief. For the grandmother who tried to protect me. For the years I spent believing I had been forgotten. For the cabin on the lake that I would never sit on the porch of again. Celeste showed up at my apartment on a Sunday, no makeup, hair in a knot, looking like someone who had been crying for weeks straight. She stood in my doorway and said 5 words I never expected to hear from her. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" We sat on my couch and she told me things I hadn't known. She told me about a fight she overheard when she was 11, our father shouting behind a closed door. "She's not even mine, and I've given her everything." She had buried it for 20 years, afraid of what it meant. She told me our mother had confessed. A brief affair during a separation. Celeste was not our father's biological daughter. The favoritism, the constant attention, the inability to ever say no to her, it was not love. It was guilt. Compensation for a resentment he could never voice. And his coldness toward me, his actual daughter by blood, was punishment for being a reminder of the family he thought he deserved. "He treated you like you owed him something," Celeste said, her voice cracking. "And he treated me like I was a debt he could never pay off." Neither of us got a real father. I didn't forgive her. That would take time, maybe years, maybe never completely. But I took her hand, and she took mine, and for the first time in our lives, we sat together without the weight of roles our parents had assigned us. 3 months later, I stood on a dock at Lake Notley, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The cabin was gone. New owners had already started renovations. I couldn't bear to look at. But the lake was still there. The mountains were still there. Grandma Lenore's memory was everywhere the water touched the shore. I had rented a small house in Blue Ridge. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a screened porch, a view of the ridgeline. I planted the rocking chair I found at an antique shop facing the water, almost identical to the one Grandma kept on her porch. Some things can't be recovered, but echoes can be found if you know where to listen. I used part of the inheritance to start a small fund. Legal aid for women fighting estate fraud. First and last for women starting over after family betrayal. Emergency grants for the ones who've been carrying everyone else so long they forgot they were allowed to set the weight down. I named it the Lenore Merit Foundation. First grant went to a 58-year-old woman in Macon whose son had forged power of attorney to drain her retirement account. She called me after we approved her application, crying so hard I could barely understand her. I thought nobody would believe me. I believe you, and now you have help. That was Grandma Lenore's legacy, finally doing what she intended. My phone buzzed last week, a text from my father. I need help, financially, just enough too. I called him back. He answered on the first ring, hope leaking through his voice. Dad. That's always been the problem, hasn't it? I was always the only one you could count on to fix things. Annika, please. You had my whole life to treat me like family. You chose not to. I hung up. Didn't feel guilty. Didn't feel satisfied either. Just finished. Like closing a book I'd been forced to read for 31 years. That voicemail from Celeste, the one that started all of this. You're not on the list, don't make it weird. She thought she was dismissing me, cutting me loose from the family performance. What she actually did was cut me free. I think about that sometimes, sitting on my porch in the early morning, watching the mist rise off the mountains while my coffee cools in my hands. How the cruelest thing my family ever did to me was also the kindest. They showed me, finally and completely, exactly what I was to them. And in seeing that clearly, I was able to see myself clearly for the first time. Not the fixer. Not the backup plan. Not the family ATM with a heartbeat. Just Annika. Just enough. The way Grandma Lenore always said I was. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect,